Hi, how's it going? My name's Tom, and I'm here again talking about F1 Fantasy. This is race week 5. We're in Saudi Arabia. Lots of talk about moving away from the template after 1 week. Lots and lots of talk about using Limitless in Jeddah, or maybe Miami, or maybe save it. So we'll be discussing that as well. Don't worry, we'll get there. Give my 2 pence on that. But yeah, we've got lots to think about because last week was actually pretty easy, I think. Both my videos, before I recorded, I was like, right, where's my head at? And I was just like, yeah, this is actually quite easy. It's obvious. I'm going for the template. And this week, it's everything's a little bit more up in the air. But I'm gonna keep my head nice and calm, cool. We're gonna stay cool, calm, and collected, and we're gonna have a nice little think together about what we're gonna do for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So here we are, we've got the track info on the Jeddah Corniche circuit in Saudi Arabia. By the way, if you're new around here, please do consider subscribing. I do these videos every week. But I'm sure most of you are kind of used to me by now. I'm sure a lot of you are kind of mainstayers. So hello to all you guys that keep chipping away in the comments every week. I see you. I do my best to reply to you. I promise I do my best, but sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming. But anyway, I'm here. I'm talking to you now. So we're looking at Jeddah. It's, for me personally, I really like this track, and I know other people will disagree. All these modern tracks, these street circuits, blah blah blah. I actually think this is one of the better ones. It's just exciting. It's so fast. It's like the fastest street circuit on the calendar. It's tight. It's twisty. It's just exciting. Like there's potential for DNF. Not that I want to see people crashing, but you can't also deny that it is kind of exciting. Obviously, do not want anyone to get hurt at all. But it is kind of exciting, that prospect of danger. Just, I don't know, it's part of what makes F1 kind of exciting, that dangerous aspect to it. So yeah, I do really like this track. And as you can see in my little group of statistics I've put down the left-hand side there, it's dangerous. It is dangerous. It's only been around for the last few years. 2021, first race here, 100% of the time. We've had the safety car out, a safety car or VSE, and lots of DNFs over the last 3 years. And I think the 2021 had, was it like 6 or 7 DNFs or something crazy as well? So pretty notorious for DNFs, although I say only 2 DNFs for the last couple of years. But yeah, it is pretty dangerous, and that will give some food for thought when we talk about Limitless a bit later, because that could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depends how you look at it. But yeah, overtakes, in terms of overtakes, another thing which is food for thought for Limitless, the fact that it's not good for overtakes, just 19th on the calendar, very low down, gives it the red rating. Not good for overtakes, so our budget guys are going to be struggling to score those points, which, you know, that some people argue that's why Limitless might be good this weekend. But we'll get there. We'll get there. I'm going to stop talking about Limitless for a minute because everyone's gone mad for Limitless. And yeah, as for the weather, obviously, I don't know what's happened to that sun there on the Friday. It looks like it's sunset or sunrise. I know I've misplaced it there for some reason. That's actually kind of annoying, but there we go. Yeah, it's going to be hot. It's going to be very hot. I've put the temperatures in for early evening, which is kind of when the race starts. So even early evening, it's going to be like low 30 degrees centigrade. So extremely hot, even in the evening, to be honest. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Let's have a look what it means for actual team building. And then I promise you we will talk about the elephant in the room. It's not even an elephant in the room. It's just like in your face, elephant in your face, Limitless. We'll get there. So I do want to have a quick look at my team situation here. And this is not just me like, oh, look at how good my team 2 is. Haha, follow me and subscribe because my team 2 is doing so good. It's not, that is not what I brought this up here for, I promise. The reason I brought this up is because it's genuinely on my mind. There is some concern in my mind about how I'm actually going to catch all the people that have a team similar to my team 2 here. They're sat here, and just inside the top 2,000, over 900 points. And my team 1 that had a devastating start in Australia is a little bit back, like 150, 160 points back, whatever it is, on 771. I think a lot of us are kind of in this kind of region, in the 700s probably. You know, the only reason you can be higher than the 700s is probably, like I say, if you dodged carnage in Australia. And I can't help but feel concerned how we're going to catch up with these teams, because, you know, my team 2 is doing really well, and it's only, I think, 2.8 million now behind on budget. It's around about 104 point something in budget. So and also we're all kind of sat on the same team now. Like my team 2, this is my team 2 on screen at the moment here. It's literally the template, like Bortoleto instead of has driver, so, you know, no Ocon, had Bortoleto in there because of budget. So maybe over time that's the sort of thing that will cause us to catch up to these sort of teams, like having an Ocon here instead of a Bortoleto. But a lot of people are moving off potentially Ocon or particularly Duan down to a Bortoleto this week, and so for the short term at least, I don't see a way to really catch up, and it does concern me. Like, is the smallish, I'm only like three on average, maybe 3 million to maybe 4 million if you've got a bit more budget than me, more than these teams. It does concern me. Is that 3 or 4 million down the line going to be enough to catch up this kind of 150 point gap, or is it all going to come down to chip strategy? I'm not sure. I'm just want to throw out there, I'm a little bit concerned. So anyway, let's just chuck it back to the actual team. And then before we get into the thick of that, I do want to talk about the budget building, because the budget building kind of dictates a lot of where our team selection goes. And I know lots of other people have talked about this extensively, but I am going to just mention it because I think it's important. I can see the F1 Fantasy Tool guys have been busy doing some homework, because you can see they've got a new column here, the 0 pointer. It makes it clear here because Bortoletto's on 4.5 million and cannot drop, so they've now cleared that on the column to make it a bit more clear. So F1 Fantasy Tools, I thank you for your kind work to make it a little bit easy for us to see what's going on. So my thinking here is, we've all been gaining our lovely 0.6s for everyone each week. And now we've got a situation where, I kind of highlighted this last week actually, saying we might in the next week or two have this situation where only 1 or 2 people are gaining budget, and what's that going to cause people to do? And that's exactly what's happened. Like straight off the bat of Bahrain, everyone's kind of suffered from the Japanese score here. Everyone's got this low column of points, a lot stronger scoring points last week out in Bahrain. But if we sort it by points in Japan, apart from Sonoda, who's just massively too expensive for my liking at the moment, 8 points is the maximum. It's a very low scoring week in Japan, and we could be seeing the same sort of thing in Saudi Arabia as well, because again, low overtakes means less opportunity for these budget guys to get overtakes and obviously positions gained, and that's pretty much the only way they score points, unless you're a godlike Has driver and you just keep getting into the points somehow, even when you start P20. Bearman, just incredible at the moment. So if we sort it by 0.6, we can see the must-haves are Bearman and Hadjar. Must-have, like if they're not on your team, I think they just have to be in your team, because they're just so likely to go up 0.6, at the very least 0.2, but they've got a great chance of 0.6. And past that, it's just, there's nothing going on here. There's nothing going on. So I am kind of this week ignoring the rest of the 0.6 column. So we move to the 0.2. Who's even close in the 0.2 column? Duan needs 8 points again. Low overtake track. Is someone like Duan going to get that? Probably not. Can he even get 3 points? He didn't quite get 3 points in Bahrain, which was a high overtake track. So Duan is probably looking at a 0.2 drop, maybe even a 0.6. Alonso, again, an Aston Martin where they have shown, like, if they're going to be fast anywhere, this might be the track for it. They have shown some signs of speed in the high speed of corners, and this is a track full of high speed corners, so maybe someone like Alonso could benefit from that, and he's got a good record round here in recent years, someone with an experienced head. Maybe we can start seeing him score some points, or at least avoiding a 0.6 drop potentially. So maybe Alonso's an alternative. Someone like Ocon as well. I don't know. All these guys they're all going to struggle. I think they're all going to struggle to get 0.2. So let's then rank it down by the next level, and we're looking at massively damage limitation rather than looking at who's going to get the budget gains. We're looking at damage limitation. So we look at who's going to try and get this 0.2 loss. Again, Bearman and Hadjar are pretty sorted there as long as they don't DNF. Ocon, actually, you look at these 2 scores, he needs 18 or 10. You think he's never going to get that, but he actually only needs 1 point to get a 0.2 drop. So 0.2 drop this week is actually considered probably a quite a good thing given the circumstances. So Ocon actually makes me think actually that's probably a good hold, and the fact that the Hazards keep finding ways to get into the points, and the fact that Ocon is also a very experienced driver, he actually gives me a lot of confidence and has a good overtake record himself. Historically, I'm happy to hold Ocon for this reason, as well as the fact that he has got a really good score from Bahrain. So as long as he doesn't DNF in Saudi Arabia, then going into Miami, he's going to have that score from Bahrain carrying over and boosting him up, making it more easy for him, hopefully, to get that rise off the back of a probable 0.2 drop here. And then past that, we've got Albon, who I don't really want. He's too expensive, doesn't fit the team structure. And then it's doing Alonso, like we've already mentioned. So it's real slim pickings there, which is why a lot of people are hopping on board the likes of Bortoleto, because he's already at the floor, 4.5 million. So it makes a lot of sense. And a week where we're just very likely to lose budget. If losing 0.2 is probably like a good thing. If your asset only loses 0.2, it's like you can almost look at it as a 0.4 gain because everyone else is going to be dropping 0.6. So if you only drop 0.2, it's like, well, hey, only lost 0.2. So going with Bortoleto, means it's impossible to lose any value at all. So I think Bortoleto's a great pick, and is partly shaping what I'm looking at in my team. So one of the easy moves that I can do in my team this week is do an out and just bring in Bortoleto. And it's as simple as that. This is a nice move for me because it then opens up 3 transfers going into the sprint weekend in Miami, which may or may not be using Limitless, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, having 3 transfers going into a potential Limitless is, I'm not guaranteed to do Limitless, as we'll discuss in a minute. So having 3 transfers, if I don't go Limitless, gives me lots of opportunity to optimize the sprint weekend. So I'm really happy in that regard. So I definitely am tempted to just do that, make that one change. I don't think Doing has much chance at all of getting a rise, so I might as well just cut my losses of Doing. He's got me that 0.2 gain. So now just chop him off, get Bortoleto in, and then carry 3 transfers over to the next week. And right now, I think that's probably more where my head is at more than anything else. But like I said, we'll be discussing Limitless in a minute. I promise we'll get there. Yes, past that, again, we see these teams where people are moving away from the template, cutting off the Mercedes constructor and hopping back on the Haas, which I personally am not really on board with. And then, instead of Bortoleto, you can probably get I can't quite afford a Russell, I don't think. No, not with that, because I'd have to keep Doing and get rid of Ocon, for example. So you could, if you depend on your budget and that, you could go over a team like this. And then this is great for budget gain potential. Although that said, George Russell's not very likely to go up the maximum. He's probably going to go up 0.1 and that's about it. But nevertheless, you've got the Haas, who will go up 0.6, probably for the next couple of weekends. So again, it fits in nicely if you are going to go Limitless in Miami to get the Haas constructor in, because it gives you effectively 1.2 million over the next couple of weeks, providing they don't DNF or whatever. But yeah, that said, I'm personally probably not going down here. I've used all my 3 transfers to get him to, let's just reset it back into this kind of template build. We'll put a lot of kind of time and energy into getting into this template build. I don't want to just immediately jump off. A lot of people are like, oh, get Haz's in. And I can see the appeal. I can 100% see the appeal. But, we all pick this, well, not all of us, a lot of us pick this template, as we're calling it, in Bahrain for a reason, because we thought it was good. And it turns out it is good. So I don't really see the reason to just jump off it, because everyone's panicking about budget. And yes, it would be nice to gain a little bit more budget, but I still think this team is just very solid for both budget and for points. And again, if we can just sort of drop off for Doing and just keep things simple, bring in Bortoleto at that floor, I don't anticipate him scoring any points. All I'd want for him is to just not DNF, and I'll be happy. Genuinely would just don't DNF, mate, and I'll be a happy man. So this is likely my team, but there is also this whole headache of Limitless. So let's discuss that. So let's talk Limitless. What I've done here is just scribble down thoughts going around my head, what's good, what's bad about using Limitless. So I've done this for Jeddah. I've done a slide in a minute, which we'll see for Miami. And then I'll give my kind of summary of where my thoughts and feelings are and roughly how likely I am to go, say, Jeddah, Miami, or later on in the season. So I'm just going to go through these kind of pros and cons and just discuss them, kind of at face value, what I see and what I'm thinking right now. So let's go through the pros, first of all, for using it in Jeddah. The whole conversation around this has come up because there were a few people that used it in Japan for good outcome because of the low overtake, low scoring. They piled in on the expensive drivers and they did well. Credit to them for going that way. And now this has become a bit more of a thing with Jeddah coming up and the Miami discussion. It's a hot topic. So let's have a look at the pros. So the first thing I put down there is that the earlier to use this chip, the better. And that's because there's less of a budget difference between the regular teams and Limitless teams the further down the season you get. I think that it's marginally better, I would say, to use earlier on in the season. Right now we're running Piastri, 2 big constructors, and then 4 budget guys. Maybe towards the end of the season, other sprint weekends or whatever, we might have 2 premiums and we have a Piastri and a Russell or something on top of the 2 constructors. Therefore, Limitless becomes less effective further down the season. But me personally, I'm not going to use it just because, oh, the earlier the better, let's just use it. I still want to be assured by either the practice sessions or sprint qualifying, if it's a sprint weekend, that sort of thing. I don't want to just be like, oh, I need to use it early, I have to use it, booking it in. I want to be as flexible as possible. But that said, the earlier to use it, mathematically, it is better, just in general. As I've already kind of touched on already in this video, it is quite good to use on a low overtake track. That's because there is this bigger gap between points scored from the big guys and the little guys, because you've got the little guys who only score points from overtaking and positions gained, more or less. All your budget options are sub 10 million. And then all your guys and your Red Bulls, Mercedes and McLarens, etc. And Ferraris, sorry, Ferrari fans, got you in there as well. They always score pretty big chunk more than the budget guys because of these low overtakes. So most of the points on these low overtake tracks are given to, position, final race position. So whoever, in the top 5 are going to score heavily, and everyone past that is going to struggle to score. So having a Limitless team that is on a low overtake track, for example, Jeddah, like I said, it was 19th for overtakes over the past 3 years, is a good opportunity. That said, there are other opportunities on other low overtake tracks. We don't have to choose Jeddah, but I would just say that this is a pro for this week. It is a big differential in Jeddah because I don't think a lot of people will be using it. I think there might be some of the more casual managers probably would have already blown it on Australia or whatever. And there'll be some that will be more holding it for a sprint weekend or holding it further down the season. So using it in Jeddah, which is a notoriously kind of risky track, is actually quite a big differential to kind of make the jump on what's probably going to be kind of a low scoring week. So certainly seems like a bit of a positive for using it this week. Now I put in here that it protects against DNFs. It doesn't really protect, but it kind of does when you think about it, because what's happened in previous years, since 2021 when this track came around, there's been a lot of DNFs, and most of them, I think all but like just a couple, I did have a quick look through, I should have written down the actual numbers, but there's only a couple from like the big 4 teams that have actually DNF'd here. Pretty much everyone else is from midfield and backmarker teams. So by going Limitless, although it's a risky track, the likelihood, judging from the previous 4 years of racing here, 4 years, whatever it is, yeah, it's 4 years, isn't it? The likelihood is that any DNFs will probably come about from the midfield pack, as opposed to the people you're going to be putting in your Limitless teams who will be out the front and kind of out the trouble. There's always going to be trouble potentially on like lap 1, for example, or like a safety car restart. There's potential for your Limitless drivers, your top tier drivers to have an accident. But in general, what we've seen is that it's the lower, cheaper guys that get into trouble. So going Limitless could be another great kind of differential, because you're piling in on the guys that are less likely to DNF, whereas everyone else has got that higher DNF potential. So that's kind of my point on that. And then another pro is actually, as I've already talked about the budget, we've looked at F1 Fantasy Tools Budget Builder. The budget losses aren't actually that bad. You've still got Behrman and Hajar. I nearly called him Badger. Let's just mush their names together, Badger. Behrman and Hajar are, probably going to rise, and you've got a couple of assets that might drop 0.2. You might get a 0.6 drop, and it's like everyone else, Piastri's going to go up, McLaren, Mercedes, they're all going to go up. So the budget losses aren't that bad. So going Limitless and having your underlying team, still probably just gain a bit of value overall is still fine. Like, people are panicking, like, you have to optimize your underlying team for budget. And it's like, yeah, it's nice, but and it's in an ideal world, but this week it's actually not that bad. It's not as bad as people are necessarily making out, and I think it's actually another reason why it's probably a good chance to just use it this week. So yeah, that's kind of the pros list for Jeddah, but let's get into, as you probably already read ahead, what I've written down for why it's not necessarily a good thing. So the fact that Jeddah is unsafe, I touched on the DNFs already. The bottom line is it's just not a very safe track, and as good as the top tier drivers are, there's still the chance that they'll DNF. The walls are close, it's a high speed circuit, it's hot, so who knows who's going to get hot under the collar and end up just crashing out. It's unsafe, and it could be pretty painful if you go Limitless and get a couple of DNFs. An obvious con this week is not a sprint weekend, so there's fewer points on offer, so it's a lower ceiling in general, but yeah, it's just a lower ceiling, so that's a con. At the moment, also, I'd argue that it's kind of unclear who the fourth or fifth best driver is. Maybe even the third best driver, or who's in that top five is what I'm trying to say. It's pretty clear you want the McLarens in there. But many are already sat on McLaren plus Piastri, so going Limitless doesn't really help you that much, and it gets you Norris, for example. But who else are you going to put in there? I mean, obviously we've got the 3 practice sessions in Jeddah, so we'll get more information as who's looking good. But at the moment, I'd be like Russell, probably. Maybe Verstappen. Like, it's a track that should suit Red Bull, but Red Bull have clearly massively struggled in Bahrain. But then this is a very different track to Bahrain, so maybe Verstappen again would be back in there. And then you've got like probably a Ferrari driver, but which Ferrari driver? Probably Leclerc at the moment. But then Hamilton's actually always seems to come good in the race, and has random driver of the day potential. I'm not going to go down that road talking about driver of the day, but yeah, Hamilton with drivers of the day in Bahrain, just 29% of people don't understand. But yeah, it's, to me, my point is that it's not clear. I mean, like I said, it might become clear after 3 practice sessions, but right now it's not clear who would actually put in the team for Limitless. So that's definitely a con. And I've already touched on, a lot of people are sat on McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri. Will the Limitless team actually be that much different? I mean, yeah, it will, because you've got 4 the other A-tier drivers instead of 4 budget drivers. But, what I'm trying to say is perhaps waiting for a point in the season where, everyone's, I keep saying everyone, the majority of us engaged managers probably sat on like McLaren, Mercedes. So what if McLaren and Mercedes are just the best constructors for Limitless as well? Then, you're not really gaining anything on the people that just sat here on the template by going Limitless this week, because you're going to go Limitless and just have the same constructors as everyone else. So yeah, maybe on a weekend, I'm thinking like potentially Imola as an example. Imola is another kind of low overtake track in a few weeks' time, where there'll be a bunch of upgrades come in. I've already heard Mercedes are bringing upgrades, big upgrade. Red Bull, I understand, are bringing an upgrade to Imola as well. Probably other teams as well, being European races, need to get their bits and pieces out there. So could we see a big shake up in Imola? It's still pre-Spain technical directive, but we could see a bit of a shake up there, and suddenly maybe we want to go Limitless on Mercedes Red Bull, for example, and then that goes completely against everyone sat on their McLaren Mercedes team, whatever. So yeah, I think it's just a bit more of a differential if we wait for a different opportunity, but there we go. I've already touched on the fact that the budget losses aren't actually that bad this week, but at the same time, people would argue that you want to make it as great as possible. So that's why I've put optimizing the underlying team budget at this stage of the season. It would be nice to not lose 0.2 or 0.6. So it would be maybe better to not go Limitless in Jeddah, to try and get those negate those gains and move into like a Bortoletto to avoid a potential like 0.6 drop from Duyan or something. And then my final point for against Limitless in Jeddah and in Miami for that matter actually is the DSQ risk, and this is kind of an interesting one that I've just kind of been thinking about. The DSQ risk is, I don't know if it's actually true or not, but it seems to be there's a lot of DSQ so far, a lot of disqualifications. We had 3 in China, had another one in Bahrain. A team's just feeling around at this season that they're getting things wrong. It's fine margins, but is this like a little bit of a theme at this stage of the season? And maybe it'll be something that gets ironed out later on in the season. Like China, potentially a good Limitless opportunity. Some people jumped on it. DQ. Like your half your Limitless team has been DQ'd, and it's absolute catastrophe. We saw Hulkenberg being disqualified for the whole plankwear thing in Bahrain. It just makes me question, is this something that is likely to be kind of less of an issue further down the season? I'm not saying that's not going to, no one's going to DQ later in the season. We saw what happened 2023 Kota further down the season. This exact same thing happened, so it's not that it won't happen. But I'm just thinking at the moment, teams seem to be a little bit unsure of how high to ride the car and that sort of thing, which is why we're getting this excessive plank wear, how much the car weighs and all this sort of thing. I don't know, it just gives me some pause for thought. But anyway, let's have a look at Miami. Okay, so we're now looking at the Miami pros and cons. Again, I'm sorry if it's just like a long list of bullet points basically, but I've just kind of thrown this together, so bear with me. Again, we'll go through the pros of Miami first of all. The same starting pro as Jeddah. The earlier to use this chip, the better. I'm not going to go into that in any more detail. I've already talked about it, but the earlier in the season, just better. Another pro is the fact that it is a sprint weekend, and we're going to have sprint quality results. So sprint weekend more points, great. That's another, nice bonus there. And also we have sprint quali, so we got a really good idea of how the teams are going to perform, at least in the sprint weekend. We saw in China, I didn't quite pan out because obviously Ferraris looked great in China. Maybe that's why a lot of people went Limitless. And Hamilton won the sprint, it's all looking dandy, but then Sunday comes along and it all goes wrong for Ferrari. So yeah, I'm not sure how much that's going to impact future sprint races and whether sprint quali will necessarily reflect what goes on the actual qualifying and the actual Grand Prix. But it's still really great information for us as fantasy managers. And so not only is it a sprint weekend, so there's more points on offer, but there's also sprint weekend, so we get the quali results, which is nice in terms of looking at overtake potential for your sort of out of position limitless drivers, as I've written there. So if you've got like someone like I don't know, like a Verstappen or a Russell or a Norris or whoever, one of these top drivers, and sprint quali they're in like P6, P7, they've got that potential to climb forward, or even further back maybe, potential to climb forward, particularly as Miami is a decent track in terms of overtaking. It's eighth for overtakes over the last 3 years on average. So yeah, it's pretty decent. It's in the top sort of third of tracks. So there is more points on offer just in general there. And also the fact that it's a lot safer. It is a lot safer than Jeddah. It's the 8th fewest in terms of DNFs over the last 3 years as well. So not only is it good for 8th for overtakes, it's also 8th for the fewest DNFs over the last 3 years. So much safer. So I feel a lot more confident. To be honest, if I put Limitless team in Jeddah, I'm not sure I could watch the race. I'd be so scared. I'd be so scared. But no, I would watch the race, but I'd be scared. But yeah, Miami's safe, pretty safe anyway. And then you've also got the better optimization of underlying team budget, so we can use Saudi Arabia to kind of shuffle our deck around a little bit and optimize going into, look at who scored well over the last couple of weekends, looking at the budget builder thing on F1 Fantasy Tools, and then planning ahead for who we're going to hold as our underlying team going into Miami. However, there are some cons, and one of the main cons I've looked at is the fact that Norris, not a great record in Miami. Obviously he won here, his first ever F1 victory here last year, P1, but past that, P17, DNF. Oh, so yeah, that is not a great look for Limitless users in Miami, because you're almost certainly going to want Norris, and he's arguably the best 2 times driver, although there's some debate that maybe Piastri is just better at the moment, the way Norris is kind of negatively chit-chatting away. But yeah, I do think Norris is going to be in the team regardless, and he's not got a great record, so it does make me a bit concerned about his finishing capabilities around Miami, but there we go. We've also got the overtakes. I've already touched on 8 for overtakes over the last 3 years, so more points on offer for the budget guys, so there'll be less of that kind of gap between the budget guys and the Limitless users. So everyone's going Limitless, but it's like, everyone who's not using Limitless, the budget guys are just going to kind of score more points in general, so that gap might be kind of smaller than a normal weekend where there's fewer overtakes on offer. And also the fact, kind of touched on this earlier as well, it's very, very close between top teams at this stage of the season, and the top 5 just isn't quite clear. And we only get FP1 and Sprint Quali. I mean, Sprint Quali is great information for us as managers, but only 1 practice session, so we get very, very little information, if any, really, on like the long run pace. And obviously the race pace is kind of the most important thing, particularly on an overtaking track where, quali is less important. So we're going to have less of an idea about the race pace going into picking our teams. And, it could be a case like, Mercedes look great because they look great in qualifying or whatever, but then the race pace is just not there or whatever. And Ferraris were the actual answer, and we just didn't know because we didn't have enough practice sessions. So that is a bit of a con in terms of any sprint weekend, really. And then finally, the same sort of cons as what I've mentioned already on Jeddah, the DSQ risk that I've already talked about, just in the back of my mind, really. And then the fact that McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri are already popular teams, so is it too much of a differential at this time? Or should we wait for a bigger shake-up in the template? So just a very quick summary for me. This is kind of roughly, very rough percentages that I've more or less plucked out the air, but chucked on the screen of where my head is at right now in terms of how likely I am to go Limitless. And I've put some pictures of these F1 drivers because that's kind of how I feel when I think about Limitless at the moment. It's such a headache. But yeah, at the moment I'd say less likely to go Jeddah. Less likely, but still very much on the table. Very much depends on the practice sessions. If it's very clear from the practice sessions like who the best 5 drivers are, then I could very well be persuaded down the road of Limitless and Jeddah, but right now I'm kind of a bit, no thanks. Miami is probably slightly ahead for me than anything else because it's earlier on in the season, because it's a sprint weekend, because it's fairly safe. If anyone does mess up qualifying from your Limitless guys, then they got the opportunity to overtake and get forward, and then maybe get more points. So I do quite like Miami. Also, it's probably going to be dry in Miami at this time as well. So yeah, at the moment Miami is probably fractionally ahead in my thinking, but I'm also very open to just leaving it till later. Like if Miami isn't clear, with FP1 and sprint quality, if it's not clear, if it's not clear who the best 5 drivers are, then I'll just park it. I'm happy to save it. There's other opportunities, like I say, there's Imola, there's, if you're really brave, Monaco. I'm thinking like low overtake tracks. Then you've also got other sprint weekends like Spa, they're not too distant future. There's plenty of other opportunity. I know it's a bit of the in vogue topic at the moment in the F1 fantasy community, but I'd say don't lose your head, don't go crazy about Limitless and everything. Just keep things calm. Let's see what the practice sessions bring to us Friday, Saturday in Jeddah. If it becomes obvious, then yeah, let's consider Limitless. Otherwise, let's just park it and focus on, probably just bringing in Bortoletto. And then, same thing again, Miami. If it's not obvious to us in sprint quali and FP1, then let's park it. Let's move on with our lives. Like, you don't have to use it at this stage of the season. There's plenty of opportunities. It's a long season. You don't have to use it early on. So right now, if I had to say, I would say, very, very, very slightly more likely to use it in Miami than elsewhere at the moment. But I am more than happy to wait further down the line as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on Limitless at the moment. And in terms of team selection, like I say, for me, it's pretty much staying with the template. Probably just moving down to a Bortoletto, probably from Doohan. Potentially just sucking up, a tiny bit of budget loss from the likes of Ocon potentially, but everyone else should just rise, so it's pretty good for budget again this week, hopefully decent for points. So that's my thoughts and feelings and team selection for this week, and I'll catch you on Friday for some more final thoughts. So yeah, thanks for listening to me, and catch you soon. Bye bye.